single mother is stopped at a U.S. airport. No birth certificate for her son, only a faded refugee document. Suspicion rises, but when a retired military canine refuses to leave the boy's side, everything changes. The dog reacts as if it knows the child because it once served with a soldier whose DNA matches the boy's. That soldier was declared dead years ago, without a body. While the dog uncovers a truth buried beneath war, lies, and silence. If this kind of real-life thriller grips you, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's more where this came from. The airport buzzed with the casual chaos of late morning. Families scurried between terminals, travelers argued with ticket agents, and the low hum of announcements echoed through the polished halls of San Francisco International. In the middle of it all, Mei Lin adjusted the strap of her oversized backpack and shifted her sleeping 5-year-old son Eli higher on her hip. He had finally dozed off after an exhausting red-eye flight from Manila, his head resting in the crook of her neck, his breathing soft and even. To anyone watching, she might have looked like just another tired mother traveling alone. Except someone was watching and they didn't think so. "Ma'am, can we ask you to step aside for a secondary screening?" the TSA officer said, his tone firm but not unkind. Mei looked up, startled. I'm sorry, is there something wrong?" Her accent was light, her English fluent but edged with the caution of someone who had learned to tread lightly in unfamiliar spaces. Mei hesitated, tightening her grip on Eli as he stirred slightly. She had gone through customs, followed every posted instruction, triple-checked their travel documents. But something in the officer's eyes told her this was more than a routine check. "I'm a U.S. citizen," she said quietly. "I have all my papers." She pulled a neatly folded packet from the side pocket of her backpack and offered it to the officer. "My son too." A second agent approached, and behind him, a large German shepherd walked obediently at heel. The dog wore a canine harness, with a badge stitched to the side. Homeland Security Narcotics and Human Detection Unit. It was well-chained, silent, alert. But the moment it approached Mei and Eli, it stopped abruptly. The dog's ears twitched. Its body stiffened. Then it emitted a low, rolling growl. Defect. Both agents froze. Charlie Heel, the handler, barked, but the dog didn't move. It planted its paws wide, positioning itself directly in front of Eli, facing outward. "Charlie," the handler repeated, more sharply now as other passengers began to slow, curious. Still, the dog didn't budge. His eyes were locked on the approaching TSA personnel as if issuing a silent warning. "Don't come closer." Mei stepped back, instinctively clutching. "What's happening?" she asked, eyes darting between the officers. The lead agent exchanged a tense glance with the handler. "We just need a few minutes to sort this out," he said, trying to sound calm. "Please come with us to the holding area." As they walked, the canine Charlie stayed glued to Eli's side. Not to Mei, not the backpack, the child. It wasn't a drug alert, it wasn't explosive detection. It was protection. That detail didn't go unnoticed by the handler, whose face had begun to register a flicker of confusion, or maybe suspicion. In the small, windowless secondary screening room, Mei sat on the bench, Eli still curled up in her lap. Charlie paced in a slow half-circle between them and the door. "Do you want to explain why your son doesn't have a birth certificate from the U.S.?" the second officer asked, arms folded. "He was born in a refugee medical station," Mei said, her voice firmer now. "Northern Jordan. I was working as a nurse. His father—" She trailed off. The silence His father was a U.S. Marine. He was declared MIA during a mission 2 months before Eli was born. "I was never notified officially, but I know what I saw." She swallowed. "He never came back." The agents exchanged another glance. One of them stepped out to make a call, the other continued to watch Charlie, who now sat facing Eli, ears still raised, posture alert, but calm. "He's never reacted like this," the handler said quietly. "He's a veteran canine, bomb squad, narcotics, even cadaver work, 4 years on duty, never once broke protocol." The room stayed still. "And he's protecting the kid," the agent added, "not alerting. There's a difference." Eli stirred, blinking awake. He rubbed his eyes and looked around groggily, then spotted the dog and whispered, "Hi, boy." Charlie inched closer and nudged his head against the child's arm. Eli giggled softly, completely at ease. The handler frowned. He knows something. May looked up, her face pale. Are we in trouble? The handler didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crouched beside Charlie, touching the canine's neck where a faint tattoo lay beneath the fur, a serial number. What if he's reacting to something he's smelled before, he said aloud, almost to himself. Something connected to the father. A door buzzed. The first agent returned with a plainclothes officer behind him. You're escalating this, he said. The Department of Defense wants to cross-reference the child's DNA with archived military records. They're requesting we hold them for questioning. May stood abruptly, her expression sharp. Why? What does that have to do with my son? The officer didn't answer. Charlie growled again, low, warning, as if he sensed the shift in tone. In the corner, a camera blinked red, recording every moment. Inside the fluorescent-lit interview room, the air had shifted. What began as a routine screening now wore the sharp edges of an unfolding investigation. May sat stiffly, hands wrapped protectively around Eli, who clung to her shirt with one thumb in his mouth, still too groggy to understand the change in atmosphere. The door clicked shut behind the plainclothes agent, whose badge simply read Department Liaison. He didn't sit. Ms. Lin, he began, placing a thin manila folder on the table. Your documentation raises some concerns. May explained slowly. I already explained, my son was born in a medical shelter run by Médecins Sans Frontières. It was unofficial. The camp was evacuated during an airstrike a month after he was born. The local records were destroyed. Her voice was calm, but her fingers betrayed a subtle tension. That's why I only have a scanned birth acknowledgement from the clinic's nurse. The agent didn't respond directly. Instead, he opened the file, revealing a grainy black and white scan, a signature barely legible in French-Arabic script, and a photo of a newborn in a makeshift crib. No state-issued birth certificate, no hospital ID, no pediatric record in the U.S. system. His eyes flicked up. To be blunt, from an immigration standpoint, your child doesn't officially exist. May blinked, stunned. He's 5. He has a passport. I filed for it through the embassy. A temporary humanitarian visa, the agent said. Approved under urgent grounds, but flagged for lack of supporting documentation. That's why Homeland Security pulled you aside. Across the room, Charlie the canine was pacing again, not restless, focused, his nose low, his movement almost methodical as he circled once around Eli and stopped behind him, sitting squarely with his gaze fixed on the agent. A low rumble vibrated in his chest. He's reacting again, the handler muttered. But it's not aggression, it's... You said this dog's been deployed before? 3 tours, the handler nodded. Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, part of the 17th Tactical Unit, primarily IED and human remains detection. But he was also part of a unit that tracked battlefield casualties, especially MIAs. At this, the agent paused. His gaze returned to Eli, whose soft curls fell across his forehead as he dozed against May's shoulder. You said his father was a Marine? May nodded. Yes, Staff Sergeant David Monroe, last seen near Fallujah in 2018. His unit was ambushed. They recovered several bodies, but not his. They declared him missing, presumed dead. The agent rubbed his chin. Yahweh, May whispered. We were never married. I didn't push for it at the time. I was 23. We were both exhausted. He said it didn't matter. Her voice broke slightly. He just wanted to get through the next mission and come home. Charlie let out a short bark, sharp and sudden. The handler stiffened. That's an alert. The room went still. An alert for what? The agent asked. It's not narcotics, not explosives. He's doing a forensic pattern recognition bark. The handler's brows furrowed. He's matching scent he's encountered before, not objects, human residue, cells, blood trace, DNA. The agent's expression darkened. You're telling me that dog just recognized this kid's DNA? I'm telling you, the handler said slowly, that this canine was deployed near Fallujah in 2018. The same operation. Same unit. If this kid carries DNA from someone Charlie tracked, he's remembering that trace. May's arms tightened around Eli. What are you implying? I'm implying nothing, the agent replied. But we're going to run a rapid DNA profile. May flinched. He's a child. He's not a suspect. You're not under arrest, the agent said, But until we verify identity and resolve the alert, you'll need to remain here. In a secure evidence room adjacent to the terminal, a forensic tech swabbed the inside of Eli's cheek as gently as she could. The boy, half asleep, didn't resist. Within 20 minutes, the results began to load. Partial match, parent/child relation detected. Further cross-referencing began. May stared blankly at the monitor as the program's progress bar ticked forward. Meanwhile, Charlie hadn't moved. He now lay on the floor beside Eli, head resting across the child's feet, like a sentry guarding something sacred. He's never done that with any kid, the handler whispered to no one in particular. The monitor pinged. The lab tech stiffened. She turned the screen. There's a secondary marker. Genetic material logged during an extraction mission from a downed medevac site near Mosul. Recovered from a blood sample found in civilian clothing. Civilian, the agent said, frowning. Female? The tech nodded. Initial testing assumed contamination, but this profile, it's too close to the child's. The agent stared at the screen. You're saying there's military DNA previously logged as unidentified, that is genetically related to this child and not through the mother? Correct, the tech said. Maternal link confirmed. But this second marker, it could be a sibling or more likely a half-sibling. From a different maternal line. The handler's voice cut in. That canine barked at the child. Not the woman, if the tech said, lowering her voice. This child isn't who she says he is? All eyes turned to May. What if he's not her biological son? But before anyone could ask, Charlie suddenly rose from the floor. His ears pricked up, his body tensed, and he turned, not toward Eli but toward the door behind them, as if he sensed something or someone approaching. The door creaked open just as Charlie's head snapped toward it, and for a beat, the room held its breath. A tall, lean man in his late 50s entered, wearing the crisp uniform of a Homeland Security Special Unit, with K-9 Division insignia on the shoulder. His name tag read Arson Ron Dietz, a legend among handlers and a war veteran with 3 decades of battlefield deployments behind him. I was called in for something unusual, he said without introduction, his eyes immediately locking onto Charlie. The dog gave a sharp, brief bark, then lowered his head in deference. Recognition, not submission. That's our old boy, isn't it? Diaz muttered, crouching slowly to meet Charlie's gaze. Charlie, 17th Tactical, Operation Iron Veil. He looked up, voice flat but alert. 6 years ago, Fallujah Periphery. Unit was tasked with identifying remains in a downed site. One of the DNA traces Charlie marked came back unverified. Civilian clothing, burned ID. No full match in the system, but something must have stayed with him. The agent nodded. He just locked on to a 5-year-old boy. Genetic trace. Possibly related to someone from that mission. Dietz didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a worn field log, flipping it open to a flagged page. He pointed at a handwritten line. Here, he said, March 17, 2019, Mosul Corridor. Trace sample 4287, non-combatant. Female, DNA logged but orphaned, no match. Now suddenly your database says it matches this boy? Partial overlap. At least a half-sibling level connection, the forensic tech replied. And Charlie recognized it. Diet stood, brushing his knees. Then, whatever happened back there, that child is biologically tied to someone presumed missing or fell away. May stood quietly in the corner, her face pale but unmoving. She hadn't spoken since the DNA report. Her mind spun with fragmented memories. The chaos at the evacuation point, the woman who died in her arms during the bombing, the baby wrapped in a UNHCR blanket, who had been left behind in the smoke and cries. The questions she had never dared ask, whether Eli had always truly been hers, now screamed through her skull. But there was no time to unravel emotion. The department liaison turned back to his tablet. Pulse surveillance from the last 3 airports she passed through, he told the tech. Let's see if there's a pattern. If someone's been watching them, I want to know who and why. It didn't take long. Within 20 minutes, side-by-side footage from Manila, Narita, and SFO painted a disturbing pattern. In each location, positioned at a discrete distance, sometimes a food court, sometimes near a security gate, stood the same man, Tall, white, early 40s black ball cap sunglasses, plain clothes. He never approached, never initiated contact, but he was always facing their direction, always following. At first glance, he doesn't break proximity protocols, the surveillance officer said. But 3 international airports, that's not a coincidence. Facial recognition? The agent asked. Running now. The system buzzed and clicked, then froze. That's not good, the officer muttered. Encrypted block. This guy's flagged government-level clearance. Some of his data is redacted. Pull any mention of Fallujah, Operation Iron Veil, or non-combatant recovery between 2018 and 2020. If he's tied to this child, he might have been boots on ground during the mission. Another few keystrokes. A name blinked onto the screen. John Keller, former CIA Tactical Recovery Specialist. Discharged 2020. Record sealed under national security order. Why would someone like that follow a refugee nurse and a child through 3 airports? The agent asked aloud. No one had an answer. Meanwhile, in the adjacent observation room, Charlie paced again, circling Eli, who now played absently with a plastic cup on the floor. The dog nudged the boy gently each time he drifted too far, as if imposing a boundary only he could see. Dietz watched through the one-way glass. It's not just scent memory, he said finally. The dog is guarding a genetic asset. It's how he was trained. If he's reacting this way, then the child's DNA doesn't just trigger memory. It confirms an unresolved alert. This kid links to something classified. Which raises the bigger question, the liaison said. Why now? Why did Charlie react today and not earlier during other routine patrols? The doe was nothing but a burdened man. What is it that you are so concerned now? Why did nobody tell you take him out? Because the proximity wasn't close enough, or the stimulus wasn't complete. But today, something aligned. The child, the mother, the scent, and possibly he gestured to the Paws security footage. That man. The agent turned back to May, who hadn't moved. Ms. Lin, when did you last see this man? He showed her a still frame of Keller from the airport footage. May flinched. He was at the refugee camp. She whispered. He worked with the UN security team. I remember the scar near his left eye. He used to walk past the medical tent. Never spoke to us. Just watched. I assumed he was just another contractor. The agent's voice sharpened. Did he ever interact with Eli? May shook her head, but slowly. No, not that I recall. But there was one night, during the evacuation, a fire broke out near the southern fence. In the chaos, I lost Eli. Just for a few minutes, I found him again in the triage tent. A soldier handed him back to me, said someone found him near the east gate. She blinked. I never saw the man who returned him. I was... Dietz's brow furrowed. If Keller was there and had access to the child before, we need to assume he knows something we don't. Possibly something he wasn't supposed to take with him. Then find him, the liaison ordered. Now. The surveillance officer tapped into airport live feeds. We've got him, he said, voice rising. He's still here. Terminal B, near gate 46. Sitting alone, no luggage, no boarding pass scanned. Looks like he's waiting. Send plainclothes agents, the liaison said. Now. As the team mobilized, Charlie rose again, suddenly alert. His ears tilted slightly. Then his gaze shifted. Not toward the monitor, not toward the handlers, but toward the door. This time not with defense, but something else, as if sensing that whatever he'd been trained to recognize had just stepped back into his radio. While plainclothes agents closed in on Terminal B, and the image of John Keller flickered across security monitors, the investigation inside the Homeland holding room deepened in a quieter, more unsettling direction. Mei Lin now sat under the focused attention of 2 intelligence officers, her palms resting flat on the metal table, the overhead light casting faint shadows under her eyes. On the wall behind her, the forensic tech projected a timeline of movement, document scans, and an enlarging section labeled Identity Verification Pending. Sergeant Ron Dietz leaned against the wall beside the handler, watching closely. Not just the monitors, but the woman herself. We need to talk about your background, Ms. Lin, the younger of the 2 officers said, tapping a pen against his notepad. You said you were a volunteer nurse in Mosul in 2018, attached to an NGO. You claimed no official connection to U.S. military personnel, yet multiple elements in this case. your proximity to a former CIA operator, a canine response tied to battlefield DNA, and now a genetic connection to a missing Marine suggest otherwise. May didn't flinch. She had shed her fear hours ago, replacing it with something colder, resolve. I told you, she said evenly. I volunteered with MSF for 2 years. My assignment was northern Iraq and western Syria. We weren't listed in your DoD reports because we weren't under your chain of command. She reached into her backpack and withdrew a weathered leather wallet. From it, she pulled a faded photo, creased along the edges, its colors muted by time and sweat. She slid it across the table. That's him, she said quietly. David Monroe. He was your soldier, and he was Eli's father. The room hushed. The agent picked up the photo with gloved fingers, holding it toward the light. In it, a young Marine stood against a sand-colored wall, dust on his boots, rifle slung across his back, one arm around May's waist. She looked younger, thinner, her smile nervous but genuine. Where was this taken? The officer asked. Talafar, she replied. March 2018, right before his unit moved. GD's deep DAs stepped forward, eyes narrowing. That photo was never made public, he said. We reviewed Monroe's personal effects after the Fallujah operation. His dog tags were found, but the rest? Burned. The unit assumed his personal photos were destroyed. How did you keep that one? Because it wasn't his, May answered. It was mine. The agent leaned closer. You're not in our system, not under the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program, not under UN repatriation. No green card record, no port of entry stamp. How did you get back here? I crossed through Jordan, she said. With help. Some of the field medics had contacts in Amman. It took months. I applied for a humanitarian visa when I reached the consulate in Manila. It was approved under emergency care provisions due to the child's health status. And no one asked about paternity, the other officer said. They did, she said softly. I said his father died in Fallujah. I didn't know how else to explain something I couldn't prove. I didn't have DNA, I didn't have military confirmation, I just had his eyes and the fact that Eli's birth date matched the week David vanished. Dietz stepped around the table. Do you know what it means if this child really is the biological son of David Monroe? I know what it means to me, she replied. He's the only family I have left. It means, the agent interrupted, that he has full rights under military survivor provisions. He becomes a potential target for anyone still invested in covering up whatever happened during Monroe's last mission. And if the connection to that sealed recovery file is confirmed, this isn't just about paternity. It's about the possibility that Monroe's disappearance wasn't accidental. Someone may have made sure he never came back. May's expression didn't change, but Charlie, still seated beside Eli, gave a small whimper, as if responding to a shift no human could detect. The officer looked back at the photo. Do you remember the last time you saw him? He was sitting on a crate, May said, mournfully silent. He had just gotten a letter from his sister. He read it out loud, even though I didn't know all the words. Then he looked at me and said, if anything happens out there, you tell them I was proud of this. He meant the baby. I hadn't told anyone yet. Only him. And then, the next day, she said, her voice hollowing, he left for an overnight op near the corridor. The bombing happened the same night. They said everyone inside the transport was either recovered or listed KIA, but they never found his body. No remains. Just dog tags. Just smoke. The agent turned back to his notes. We need to verify everything. We'll run a cross-check on Monroe's dental and DNA records against Eli's. We also need to match your biometric data to any archived field photos from that operation. And if they match, she asked. Then, he replied, you'll finally exist in our system, but it also means someone deliberately scrubbed you from it. And we'll need to find out who. In the corner, another officer entered with a secure tablet. We may have more, he said. NSA just pushed a flagged memo from 2019. Internal CIA report. Mentions a recovered photo in a private collection. Civilian woman holding a newborn beside a damaged Humvee. Location is classified, but the image matches a facial scan with 92% certainty to Miss Lynn. He paused. And the metadata on the file? Logged by John Keller, the same guy who supposed. The room froze. Dia stepped back toward the one-way glass. He took a photo of them, kept cataloged it under an encrypted log, then watched her cross continents for 5 years and never once intervened. The agent's voice dropped, which means Keller knew exactly who they were all along. And he's not here by accident. Inside the operations room, tension was no longer just administrative. It was personal, electric, like static clinging to every surface. Sergeant Ron Dietz stood at the center of it, arms folded, eyes fixed on the slow replaying footage from 6 years ago, now grainy from age and digital degradation. A drone-captured recording of the aftermath of a blast in Fallujah's outskirts played on loop. Smoke rising from a scorched compound, debris strewn like forgotten names across the sand. Among the rubble, blurred figures in military gear moved with grim efficiency. One of them held a leash. Paws, Dietz commanded. The analyst froze the frame. Zoom on the canine handler. As the image sharpened, the outline of a German shepherd came into view, panting hard, tail low, head cocked slightly, locked onto a burned wall fragment with frantic focus. "That's Charlie," Dietz said quietly. Same posture, same alert signal. That day he wouldn't leave that spot. Kept barking. We thought it was residual scent from Monroe's blood. He turned, voice low, but looking at how he responded to the boy today, it was the exact same bark, exact same stillness afterward. The forensic analyst nodded slowly. Then the boy's DNA might not just resemble Monroe's. It might carry traces of a compound signature, maybe from Monroe himself. The liaison raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting Monroe was there long enough for the dog to imprint on his presence alive?" "Dogs don't bark for remains like that," Dietz replied. "They whine. They circle. They don't hold their growl like they're guarding." Charlie did. And today, when Eli walked in, it wasn't a recognition of death. It was protection, like the target was still active. The room held still. The implications weren't just about lineage anymore. They were about presence, about survival. The agent turned to the wall, tapping open a locked folder from military intelligence archives. The contents had just arrived under priority encryption. 4 days after Monroe was declared KIA, a satellite picked up heat anomalies in an adjacent facility 12 clicks southeast of the blast site. He began, too small for an airstrike, no activity on drones. The structure didn't match standard layouts, looked more like a storage container complex. No movement. The file was marked low priority, and because we already logged Monroe's tags, no one followed it up. Until now, Dietz murmured. The analyst flipped to another document, a declassified interrogation transcript from late 2019. A captured insurgent, pressed about U.S. military prisoners, claimed there was one alive, a man held for years because his name opened doors. But the name had been redacted. What if that man was Monroe, the liaison asked. What if he survived the blast, but wasn't rescued because we were too quick to close the file? The silence deepened. May, who had been seated in the corner listening, stepped forward, her voice steady. "I know this is going to sound impossible," she said, "but Eli talks about someone he's never met, a man in dreams. He says he hears a voice that tells him to remember things. Colors, sounds. He draws maps, complex ones. I thought it was from the trauma of the camps. Memory doesn't pass genetically," the analyst said flatly. "No," May said, "but connection does. Energy, recognition. We say dogs remember scent for years. Why not people in other forms?" Charlie barked loud and sudden, not an alarm but an insistence. He moved to the table where Monroe's mission file lay open. He sat, tail stiff, gaze unmoving. The room stared. "Okay," Dietz said. "Let's follow the dog." The team scrambled. Within minutes, a small tactical map was uploaded on screen. The complex mentioned in the satellite logs still existed. Though technically outside a declared combat zone, it sat within a jurisdictional blind spot, an area co-managed by U.S. intelligence and local forces. Officially, no Americans were detained there. Unofficially, its perimeter had been reinforced 3 months after Monroe's supposed death. "This is your gray site," the liaison muttered. "No flag, no responsibility, just silence." And Keller, the younger analyst, asked. He logged that photo. He knew about May, about the boy. Did he know about the compound too? If Keller had access to the raw satellite feeds, Diaz said grimly, He might have known Monroe wasn't dead, maybe even helped keep it that way. They turned to the live feed from Terminal B. Keller still sat near Gate 46, sipping a coffee, scrolling a phone. Column not hiding, as if he were waiting for something to unfold. Why hasn't he left? Someone asked. Because he wants to see what we'll do, Diet said. Because this is his insurance policy. He's holding something, maybe knowledge, maybe leverage. But if he was involved in holding Monroe, or covering it up, he'd never let the boy slip past him without knowing who he was. Another ping interrupted them. A second confirmation had just landed from the genetic lab. The match between Eli and Monroe was now at 99.92% parent-child. Undeniable. The room shifted again. Then that boy is our key, the liaison said. To Monroe, to Keller, to whatever happened in that compound. Dietz nodded. And the dog already knows it. He crossed the room and knelt beside Charlie, his voice low. You're taking us back there, aren't you, boy? Charlie thumped his tail once, as if answering. Then the radio crackled. Update on Keller, an agent's voice came through. He just stood up. Looks like he's heading toward baggage claim, still no carry-on. He's not boarding. He's waiting. Waiting for who? The liaison asked. Charlie lifted his head again, Aza's twitching. His eyes darted, not toward the door this time, but toward the ceiling, as if something above them, invisible and moving, had caught his attention in a way that suggested the arrival of something, or someone, familiar. The tension in the operations room had reached a brittle, unspoken threshold when the arrival of an unmarked team cracked it wide open. 4 individuals entered without announcement, dressed in plain suits, no TSA badges, no homeland insignia, just silent authority pressed into each purposeful movement. One of them flashed a black leather credential with no seal, just a deep embossed code that even Dietz couldn't immediately place. The lead stepped forward and addressed the liaison with clipped precision. This investigation is now under the jurisdiction of Department 72B, he said, folding the credential and tucking it away before anyone could study it too long. As of now, all intel, footage, and personnel are classified. We'll need you to transfer custody of the woman, the child, and the asset. On what ground? The liaison asked, stepping forward, visibly stiffening. There's a national security concern, the agent replied. This case intersects with an ongoing operation with sealed authorization. You no longer have clearance to proceed. Dietz stepped in. I've been overseeing this dog for over 4 years. He's a military asset, and the child he's responding to is the son of a Marine declared KIA in a mission I commanded. You're telling me you're pulling them out mid-investigation without disclosing jurisdiction? The agent offered a tight smile. We're not asking. At that moment, the door behind them opened again, and May was escorted into the room by a uniformed TSA officer, who clearly had no idea what she was walking into. Charlie immediately stood up, ears forward, body tense. Eli walked a few steps behind her, gripping her hand tightly. Mommy, he whispered, sensing the room had changed. Without warning, one of the plainclothes agents stepped forward and took May by the elbow. You'll come with us, he said. Another moved toward Eli. Charlie barked once, loud, commanding, not out of fear but with a clear, protective intent. His stance lowered, front paws apart, body positioned between Eli and the agent. Control your dog, the agent snapped. He's not attacking, Dietz warned. He's responding to an unlawful separation of a minor from his guardian. You're within operational authority, the man replied, gripping Eli's arm. That's when Charlie erupted. The growl that left the canine's throat wasn't just sound. It was an earthquake, rumbling from somewhere primal. He lunged, not to bite but to stand fully between the boy and the hands reaching for him. The child shrank backward, eyes wide. He doesn't like them, Eli cried. He says they're wrong. Stand down, one of the agents ordered, reaching for a taser. If you touch that dog, you'll start a war, Dietz barked. Stepping in, hand reach. This isn't protocol. You don't handle a military canine like a civilian threat. He's acting within protective training parameters. The boy is being removed without guardian consent. You have emergency override authority, the plainclothes leader said. This time stepping closer to May. You were never properly processed through immigration channels. Technically, you're still a foreign national under provisional humanitarian terms. That makes the child's custody ambiguous. He's my son, May snapped, You think after 5 years of hiding and surviving and crossing oceans, I'd come here without knowing that? You'll need to determine that through internal assessment, the man replied, signaling to his team. Another agent attempted to lift Eli, who now clung to Charlie's harness like it was an anchor in a raging sea. Then Charlie made it clear. He would not move. He braced his body low, pressed against Eli's legs, teeth bared, not to threaten, but to hold the line. The handler stepped forward but didn't give a command. He's choosing, Dietz muttered. He's making a field decision. That's not defiance. The liaison attempted to interject again, but the Black Bad team overrode every voice. We'll remove them now. You can file your reports with Central, the lead agent said, already pulling out a secure comm device. May was seized gently but firmly. Eli screamed. Mom, he shouted, don't let them take me. Charlie lunged again, barking like thunder, pushing backward against the agent holding Eli. One of the agents raised a stun wand. Don't, Dietz shouted, stepping between them. You strike him, he won't recover from that, and this dog may be the only link we have to finding Monroe. He's just a dog, the agent said coldly. You're wrong. May said, her eyes locked onto Dietz's. Please don't let them take my son. The team ignored her. One of them finally yanked Ellie off his feet. The boy's screams split the room. Charlie snarled, fully baring his teeth now, muscles taut. A second away from biting, a second away from a federal incident. Then, without warning, the room lights flickered, and someone entered without clearance. A tall woman in civilian clothes, early 40s, walked in holding a slim tablet with a flashing DHS authorization code and a signed motion from the Deputy Director of Homeland's Tactical Investigations Bureau. You're going to want to stop, she said firmly. Put the child down. The lead agent turned. You're out of your lane. A judge has just issued a stay, based on new evidence including the genetic confirmation and the surveillance records tied to John Keller. There's now probable cause to investigate illegal detainment and potential intelligence fraud related to Staff Sergeant David Monroe. Let us see the order, the agent said. She handed him the tablet. He read in silence for 8 seconds, then cursed under his breath and signaled his men to step back. The agent holding Eli finally lowered him to the floor. Charlie immediately pushed forward, nose against the boy's hands, checking, calming, grounding. May, tears streaking her face, collapsed to her knees and pulled Eli into her arms. The agents in plain clothes didn't leave, but they stepped out of the room, silent and sharp-eyed, speaking rapidly into encrypted comms. The woman with the tablet turned to Dietz. We have less than 30 minutes before jurisdiction flips again. If there's anything else the dog remembers, we use it now. Charlie lifted his head slowly, eyes locked toward the hallway as if he had already made his decision. Down in the sub-level security corridor, behind 2 locked doors and a badges server room, a junior forensic technician named Cam Reyes stared at his terminal in silence, the cursor blinking over a newly unsealed file that hadn't existed 30 minutes earlier. He hadn't meant to find it. He was doing a secondary cross-match of Eli's DNA with archived battlefield samples to verify chain of custody protocols. A routine cleanup task requested by Tactical, but when the software flagged a match within a restricted Tier 4 database, normally redacted by Dodd for 4-hour eyes, his monitor froze. They unlocked, displaying something it shouldn't have, a single line of metadata marked recovered. Operation Dagger echoed, Ghost. Cam's breath hitched. He clicked deeper. The file's narrative was brief, clinical, and unfinished. It read, Operative confirmed KIA following detonation event outside Mosul AO. Recovery team located fragments of dog tags, partial blood trace. No body recovered. Intelligence analysis noted anomaly in thermal satellite data post-admit. File sealed under executive order, cross-referencing with live DNA match prohibited unless authorized by 72. Cam leaned back in his chair. Every instinct told him to close the window, delete the trace, pretend the system glitch never happened. But a second instinct, deeper, older, rooted in something like morality, made his hand move instead toward the printer. He selected the core narrative and one image attached to the file. A blurry still of Monroe, shirtless and bleeding, dragging a wounded soldier toward cover in a compound that no longer existed. The timestamp was 3 hours after the time his death had been logged. Cam clicked print. Upstairs, May sat on a bench near the restricted terminal lobby, holding Eli in her lap, her hands trembling even though her expression stayed blank. The adrenaline had long passed. Now only silence filled her lungs. Dieth stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the hall with guarded eyes. The woman who had brought the DHS override, the one May only knew as Agent Rowe, was on a secure call, pacing tight, her voice low and tense. Charlie sat at May's feet, tail curled around his body, alert but calm for the first time in hours. Eli played absently with the dog's collar, whispering things no one else could hear. Then Cam appeared, slightly breathless, eyes wide like someone who'd seen behind the curtain. He held a single manila folder, the kind that shouldn't have existed outside command centers, and extended it toward May. "I'm not supposed to give you this," he said. "I could lose my clearance." She looked up slowly. "Then why are you—" Cam swallowed. "Because it's your right." May opened the folder with fingers that hesitated halfway through every movement. Inside was a printed dossier only 2 pages long, and a photo paper-clipped to the corner. The same face she had memorized in dreams looked back at her, but this time, not in uniform. He was in a compression shirt, bruised and bloodied, eyes squinting toward the camera. Alive. Marked captured environment. The date didn't match the timeline they gave her. It was dated 4 days after his supposed death. She dropped the folder. Her knees buckled. Dietz caught her before she hit the floor. "They lied," she whispered, breath broken. "He was alive. He was alive, and they closed the book." Charlie nudged the folder on the ground, nose pressing into the photo as if drawn to the scent on the paper, his body tense once again. Agent Rowe ended her call and approached quickly, her eyes locking onto the folder as soon as she saw it. "Where did that come from?" she asked. Cam didn't answer. Rowe crouched beside May, voice softer now. "This file, if confirmed, is from a black tier program. One so classified it's not even listed under active operations. Monroe wasn't just a soldier. He was part of a zero-footprint unit. His death was—" Rowe didn't reply. Instead, she turned to Cam. "You pulled this from a military server?" He nodded. "It came up in a cross-match. His DNA was tagged as KIA, but the logs show activity past the date of death. They marked the sample erased but didn't wipe the backup record in the drone recovery archive. Then someone wanted plausible deniability," Rowe murmured. "If Monroe's still alive, he may have been kept because of what he knew, or because someone made sure no one could come looking for him." Dietz stood now, his face grim. "Which means if Keller was watching May and the boy, he was protecting something or making sure a door didn't reopen. Until now," Rowe said. "And if Monroe's status was fabricated, it opens up something bigger, something Keller's team, or whoever inherited this mess, doesn't want May picked up the photo again, her hands steadier now, rage clearing the fog. "Then we go find him," she said. "I'm done waiting." At that moment, a silent alarm triggered across the terminal. One of the black agents re-entered the room, face tight, eyes on Rowe. "Keller's gone," he said. "We lost eyes 5 minutes ago. Baggage claim is empty. No security breach, no trace. He vanished. He never intended to stay," Dietz muttered. "He stalled us, bought time." Rowe straightened. "Then whatever he was waiting for, it's already in motion." Charlie stood suddenly, ears forward, head tilting toward the west-facing exit, where a gust of wind swept through a service corridor. The boy reached for his harness instinctively. The dog didn't move, only stared, still, focused, as if something familiar had passed beyond the edge of knowing. An urgent alert from one of the service corridors led Rowe and Dietz to a restricted staff access zone near the west end of the terminal. A maintenance worker had noticed a man lingering in the emergency stairwell, tall, fit, dressed in the same plain attire described by earlier footage. This time, he hadn't been fast enough. By the time agents arrived, he'd backed himself against a utility panel, unarmed, silent, and almost calm as 2 tactical officers pinned him to the wall. He made no attempt to resist, only raised his hands slowly, eyes scanning the space as if assessing who he'd finally chosen to speak to. Dietz was the first to step forward. "John Keller," he said evenly. "You've been watching her for years. Why now?" The man's eyes shifted to Rowe, then back to Dietz. "Because I knew eventually the wrong people would try to clean it up. and you weren't supposed to find him. They pulled him into a private interview room, no cameras, no recordings, just Roe, Dietz, and 2 other intelligence observers behind one-way glass. Keller sat with a stillness that wasn't fear but fatigue. He looked older than his file, deep creases along the eyes, jaw locked like someone who hadn't slept without a weapon under his pillow in years. "You've got 10 minutes, Roe said sharply. "You've been tailing a civilian woman and a minor for nearly a year. You appear in at least 3 international terminals. Never board, never follow. What were you doing?" Keller looked at her, then down. "Waiting. For what? For the DNA to surface. For someone, anyone, to notice. Because if I spoke first, I'd disappear next." "What does that mean?" Diaz asked. "Your military eye was ghost unit. Same as Monroe, same as a dozen others. Black tier insertion. No formal acknowledgement. Our exit strategy was optional." "So Monroe didn't die in that blast?" Dietz said. "No," Keller replied. "He was injured, left behind when the first evac bird pulled out. Command marked him as expendable when intel changed. Said the blast made recovery impossible. That was a lie. I was there 2 hours after it happened. He was breathing, barely, but breathing." Roe's pen stopped mid-scratch. "Then why didn't you extract him?" "Because I was ordered to leave him," Keller said coldly. "They said he knew too much, that he'd been exposed to something during the op that made him compromised. They didn't say what, only that he was a national security variable. Then they redacted everything, our comms, our logs, even the sat footage. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were assets, and assets don't get funerals." There was a silence, thick and hard, before Roe asked, "And the child? How does he fit?" Keller looked toward the wall, toward the invisible glass behind which May and Eli were seated. "Recognized him the moment I saw him in that Manila checkpoint. The eyes, the hair, Monroe's face but smaller. And when the dog reacted at the gate today, I knew my window was closing. The boy proves he survived. He proves Monroe lived long enough to create something the program never accounted for. That makes him dangerous." "To who?" Diaz asked. "Because this isn't just about hiding a soldier. It's about hiding what he saw, what he was part of. We were sent into a facility outside Mosul that wasn't on any map. Foreign run, but with American hands on the funding. Monroe stumbled across something about transfers, not just weapons. People, subjects. He wanted to blow the whistle. They blew up the compound instead." Roe's face darkened. "Are you saying he was silenced?" "I'm saying they tried," Keller said. "But he didn't die, and they didn't know what to do with him, so they held him, somewhere quiet, somewhere without oversight. That's why I kept following the kid. Because if they ever found out Monroe had a son, if they proved his survival through lineage, they'd bury the evidence before it Outside the interview room, May stared at the glass, unable to hear the words but reading the posture, the shifting of shoulders, the way Keller barely looked up when he spoke. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows where David is." Charlie sat upright again. Every time the name was spoken, he reacted, subtle but consistent. A twitch in the ears, a lean forward as if the syllables unlocked something buried in memory. Eli sat curled beside him, one hand gently brushing the dog's side, drawing circles. Back inside, Roe stood abruptly. "Where is Monroe now?" "I don't know," Keller admitted. "They move him every 6 months. I only got a location once, 4 years ago. Desert compound, no radio traffic, not even a flag. He wrote something, got it out through a medic who owed him a favor. A note. 6 words. He looked straight at Roe. "Tell her and the boy I remember." Keller nodded. "That's why I stayed close. If he ever escaped, I figured he'd try to find them. And if he didn't, maybe the kid would lead someone back to the truth." Roe leaned in, voice colder now. "You could have gone to the press. You could have gone to Congress and disappeared before I hit send," Keller said. "You don't understand who gave the orders. They're not in the Pentagon. They're in the margins of contracts, in the footnotes of budget drafts no one reads. You go against them, you vanish. Just like he did." A knock came at the door. An analyst stepped in, eyes wide. "You've just received satellite ping from a covert location in the northern triangle of Iraq. It matches an old encrypted beacon assigned to Monroe's squad, one we thought was deactivated. Someone turned it back on? Rowe asked. The analyst nodded. 2 hours ago, just after the dog alerted on the boy. Keller looked up sharply. Then he's alive and he knows his son's been found. As the satellite ping from the Northern Triangle was confirmed by a second source, chaos erupted inside the Homeland Command Center. Orders were split down 2 lines, one seeking containment, the other pushing for exposure. Agent Rowe stood at the center, caught between 2 tides of bureaucracy, her phone vibrating with incoming calls from officials far above her pay grade. But in the eye of the storm, Maylin sat still. She held Eli's hand and stared directly into Rowe's eyes. No more hiding, she said. No more extraction. No more sealed doors. No more silence. If David Monroe is alive, I'm not going to be the reason the truth stays buried. You want my help? Then I want this story brought into the light. You realize what that means? Rowe asked. Political expose people who don't want exposure. There will be consequences. Political? Personal. Then let them face them, May replied. My son deserves to know who his father is. Not through a file, through the truth. And if he's dead, I want to see where he fell, not where they told me he did. Dietz stood in the doorway. He didn't speak, but he gave the smallest nod, one of soldierly respect. Then he turned to Rowe. Let the dog lead, he said. It's the one part of this story that hasn't lied. 3 days later, under official cover as a behavioral reassessment mission, K9 Charlie was flown by military transport to Iraq, accompanied by Dietz and a small team of trusted handlers. The compound, formerly listed as Outpost Echo 3, had long been stripped of its tech and reclassified as neutral terrain. But satellite records still showed the outline of buried chambers beneath what had become a wind-blown husk of concrete and sand. They landed under overcast skies. The air smelled of iron and old heat. Charlie stepped out of the transport with the steadiness of an old soldier returning to a battlefield that had never fully left him. He didn't bark. He didn't pause. He walked. The team followed in silence as Charlie moved past the rusted fence, through a collapsed gate, and into the ruins of a storage bay that had long since been declared sterile. The official record noted it as 0 survivability, citing blast radius and thermal decay. But Charlie stopped near a corner wall, sniffed, then began to dig. Not frantic, methodical, deliberate, like he knew something the paperwork didn't. Get ground-penetrating radar. The technician deployed a lightweight scanner over the area Charlie had circled. The screen blinked, then froze. There's something metallic about 4 feet down. Not munitions. Flat, possibly plated. Charlie kept digging, his paws bloodied at the edges, dust clinging to his muzzle. Another handler tried to pull him back, but he growled, not aggressively, just firmly, as if to say, not yet. May and Eli weren't on the ground, but a secure video line kept them connected. She watched from a debrief room in Virginia, hand over her mouth, Eli silent at her side. That's where your father served, she whispered, and maybe where he was left behind. Charlie knows, Eli said. He's talking with the ground. Back at the site, shovels replaced Paws. Within an hour, the team uncovered the top of what looked like a sealed door, a hatch, reinforced, unlisted in any base. The metal was singed but intact. There was a lower level, Dietz muttered. They sealed it in the blast. Probably told everyone it was vaporized. We need to go in, Rowe said through the satellite link. You're cleared to breach. It took another 3 hours to cut the door open. When it finally gave, the stench of time and dust rushed out, followed by silence. The chamber beneath was partially collapsed, but intact enough to be walked. Charlie didn't wait. He descended, slow but sure, every step like a memory retraced. He stopped in the second room, an old infirmary, wires dangling, cots overturned. Then he barked. The team swept the room. Nothing. No bodies. No blood. But in the far corner, beneath a rusted cot, was a small metal box. Inside, a dog tag, scorched, bent, but legible. Monroe DAVT. And beneath it, something even stranger. A strip of cloth child-sized. A baby blanket, faded, the initials EM stitched in the corner. Charlie sat down beside it, then howled. Long, low, not in grief, in recognition. As the team pushed deeper into the lower chamber, the air grew thinner, filled with a stale metallic scent that clung to skin and memory alike. The flashlight beams cut through dust clouds, illuminating fragments of what had once been a makeshift shelter. Cot frames, supply crates, torn field manuals. Charlie advanced without hesitation, nose close to the ground, pausing at intervals to sniff, reassess, and move again. He stopped at the far wall, where a thin sheet of plastic had been pinned against the concrete, using improvised nails. Behind it, a crawl space just barely wide enough for a man. Dietz went in first, flashlight leading. It took 30 seconds to reach the other side. What he found made his breath hitch. The space was no more than 10 feet wide and 6 feet deep, insulated crudely with thermal blankets and flattened ration boxes. In the corner, sealed inside a plastic bag, lay a blood-stained cloth, a worn notebook, and a water bottle marked with U.S. Army logistics tape. They called for a field analyst immediately. The bag was retrieved, scanned, and transferred to a portable lab outside the compound. It took 4 hours. When the results came in, no one spoke for a full minute. The dried blood on the cloth belonged to David Monroe. There was no doubt, but what truly shattered the air inside the debrief tent was the date inside the notebook. On the first page, written in shaky block letters with a black gel pen, it read, "If someone finds this, I am alive. I was here. Please tell my family. I saw the boy in a photo. I know he's mine. I'm sorry I couldn't reach them. I'm not sure who is still listening, but if they are, I need help." At the bottom, a date, 9 months ago. The compound exploded in motion. Communications rerouted. A new satellite sweep was authorized. More personnel were flown in under blackout orders. If Monroe had written this less than a year ago, and if he'd still had access to pen, food, and memory, it meant he wasn't a relic. He was a prisoner, possibly still alive, possibly moved again. But now, he was no longer a ghost. He had left a voice behind. Back in the United States, the media storm ignited before the Pentagon could control it. Someone, no one knew exactly who, leaked a photograph of the blood analysis report, the photo of the hatch and a redacted version of the notebook's first page. Within 24 hours, national networks picked it up. "Lost Marine may still be alive after 6 years of silence," one headline blared. "Operation Ghost Ward, a family's fight for the truth," said another. News vans crowded the perimeter of Homeland's regional office by noon the next day. Under public pressure and congressional oversight, the Department of Defense issued a rare emergency declassification. The story was no longer a whisper passed between locked rooms. It was a reckoning. May and Eli were formally released from custody 3 days later. No more observers, no more threats, no more files held in limbo. A civilian tribunal declared them free to relocate, with full legal residency and protections under military family doctrine. The Department of Veterans Affairs issued a posthumous recognition of Monroe's active duty service, an act that, as May pointed out in front of a live camera, would not be accepted until someone showed her his grave or his face. Charlie sat beside her during the interview. He wore a new collar that day, stitched in gold thread with the words honor and memory. Eli held it tightly during every question, his small hand gripping the leash like a lifeline. When asked by a reporter why she hadn't tried to run, May simply said, "Because running would have meant forgetting, and I promised David I wouldn't let our son grow up not knowing who his father was. Not just the soldier, but the man." The following week, at Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall, a ceremony was held in private. Few were invited, even fewer spoke. But in the middle of the courtyard, with the wind curling quietly through the flags, Sergeant Ron Dietz knelt beside Charlie and unpinned a medal from a velvet box. "For exceptional service, loyalty, and the preservation of life beyond protocol," he said, voice steady, "K-9 Charlie is hereby retired with full honors and awarded the Distinguished Service K-9 Medal." The applause was soft but real. May stood nearby, her hand on Eli's shoulder. The boy beamed. Charlie didn't bark. He only leaned slightly into the medal being placed on his vest, as if recognizing not the formality, but the completion of something deeply earned. As the crowd dispersed, Dietz walked over to May, offering her a small envelope. Inside was a photo, one last remnant from the dig site. A Polaroid, aged but untouched, sealed inside the hatch wall behind a pipe. In it, Dietz Monroe smiled, one arm around a local medic, the other holding a baby wrapped in a blanket with the initials EM, stitched in blue. He kept it, Diet said. All this time, May took the photo, tears. He never let us go, she whispered. Even when they tried to erase him. Outside the base, the reporters waited again. But this time, there was no statement. No press release. Just a woman, a boy, and a retired war dog walking through the gates. One step at a time, into a future reclaimed not by violence, but by memory, truth, and the unbreakable link between those who search and those who wait. If this story moved you, consider subscribing, so you won't miss the next one. I'd love to hear what you think, what part hit you the hardest, and which moment stayed with you the most. Also, where in the world are you reading from? Drop it in the comments below. Let's talk.